we did that.
So we've climbed a couple of trees. We were just shaking them and then picking the apples up off the ground. We did send a bucket up into a couple trees and hand pick some, probably about a bushel that we're going to try canning. The rest that we are cleaning up, we brought over here. There's definitely more than enough for what we need. A couple bushel here. These ones, anything that fell on the ground that's bruised or started to split, slightly damaged, your not pretty ones. We're going to use these to make our cider. So this is the apple press. Basically what we'll do is put the apples in the top and then they will get run through and crushed in here and fall into this basket. Okay. Then the basket gets slid forward and there's a piece that will go on top of the crushed apples, and this will get twisted down to press them and all the juice will come out the end.
Jenna, you could just use. You don't want your boards? They're in your room.
I know that might grow.
She'll be right back. Alright, you have more jugs?
I did. I got 4. Alright, everything is done. We're just cleaning up all of the leftover apple pieces and all of our apple cider. Hey everyone, we just got back home. I have some of the apple cider that we made because who doesn't want to drink fresh apple cider? What we're doing today is taking some of the apples that we brought home. We're going to do canned sliced apples or maybe diced depending on how they look when we cut them up. And then we're going to do some applesauce. The first batch of diced apples or sliced is going to be in a honey syrup that we found online. It's 11 cups of water and 1 cup of honey for a full batch, which is about 17 pounds of apples. It'll be about 7 quarts when we're finished. So we're going to try that out because we don't like to add a ton of sugar to our fruit. And these apples are sweet enough that they don't need a ton of sugar. If we have enough after this and the applesauce, we might try some with just a simple syrup with sugar. Just because we have them, we can try a few different recipes. And we'll keep that sugar amount really low. But we're going to get these peeled on our KitchenAid attachment. We'll get them cut up and run through. We're going to use fresh fruit. You can do like a lemon water just to keep them from browning. And it helps preserve some of the taste as well. And then when we get enough of those, we'll get them boiling in our syrup. and we'll walk you through the process on how we do that. So we decided that we are going to cut these into cubes or bite-sized pieces. It'll be a little easier to handle them, and we'll be able to fit more in each jar than we would with just slices. So after we get these peeled, there's still a little bit left of the peel. The machine is not perfect, so I'm just going to trim those off some and cut them into pieces about this big, and they're going to go directly into my fresh fruit bath so they don't brown. I'll trim off the excess, and then once I get these in the fresh fruit, we'll let them sit for a minute. I'll mix them in periodically, and then I'm going to transfer them over to a different bowl just to make room for this mixture. And we'll get a good bit of apples built up before we start the next step in our process. So we are almost done cutting up the rest of the apples. We've got just a few left. We have the syrup starting to boil. We're going to get that to a roaring boil. We'll pull it back to a simmer, and then we're going to dump all of these apples into the syrup, and we will let them simmer in that for, I believe it's 5 minutes. While that is going and we finish up these last few, we're going to get the jars washed and get those prepped so they're clean and hot, ready to fill. We'll have the lids and the rims set out and ready to go, and we will show you how that looks when the syrup is boiling. So this has boiled or simmered for 5 minutes, and we realized that it is way too long for the apples that we have. As you can see, it's pretty much applesauce at this point. So the new plan is this is going to become applesauce. We're just going to cook it down a little more, get some of the water out of it, and we're going to retry this process and do it a little differently. Okay, so we are going to do this again and dice the rest of the apples and do a second batch a little differently. I think our apples were too soft to simmer them the way that we did. So this time, excuse you, this time I think what we're going to do is dice them and put them directly into the jars after we put them through the fresh fruit. And then we'll just make the syrup and put the syrup on top and then water bath them. And that will still cook them while they water bath, but it shouldn't overcook them, hopefully. But we'll find out. Okay, so we let the applesauce boil down some. It's still a little on the runny side, but we're going to go with it. And we decided to make it kind of a chunky applesauce, so we left some larger chunks in it. They're definitely soft enough. So we're going to start putting these in jars. We're doing all quart jars. They're being a little difficult. But we're going to fill them and leave about 1 inch of space at the top, and then we will water bath them. Okay, so we have the jars full, left about 1 inch of space at the top. We are going to wipe all of the rims so they are clean and have a good seal. And then we're going to get all of the lids on, tighten them down to hand tight, and we will then water bath them. Okay, so we have the water boiling for our water bath. We have a full pot of jars. We're gonna let that boil for 20 minutes. Typically we do this outside. We have a propane, it's like a turkey broiler stand that this pot sits on, but it is very windy today and we don't feel like dealing with the open flame and potentially blowing out. So it fits on the stove, barely, but we're going to make this work. While that is going, I've got in this pot the syrup for our diced apples. So we're going to pack the jars with the apples and then add the syrup on top of those instead of boiling them, and hopefully those stay a little firmer. We are going to take these apples, pack them into these jars. We want them packed really snug, but we're going to leave an inch to an inch and a half of space near the top. That way when we add the syrup to it, there's enough room that it doesn't overfill them. So we'll go ahead and get these ready. So this recipe has way more apples in it than I think it needs to. We definitely are going to have to do another batch of sliced apples and make more syrup. But we're going to add syrup to all of these jars. We'll pack them down with our little nifty tool and then add some more apples if we can fit any more. And then these will get water bathed here in a few minutes, and we will get syrup ready for another 8 jars. We've got a batch water bathing right now and then 4 more jars to do right after. But this is what the applesauce looks like. We wanted to leave some chunks of apples in there. As you can see, I need to work on keeping the amount of apples in it level, but they look pretty good. They're already starting to seal. This is the diced apples. As you can see, they're no longer packed tight. They definitely got soft while cooking, so we'll have to see how they turned out. But overall, they look pretty good. So fingers crossed that everything seals. So our apple butter is done. We took what was left of the applesauce that wasn't going to fit in jars, and I didn't have enough apple chunks in it to keep them a little more even. So we went ahead and put that in the crock pot. I found a couple of slow cooker apple butter recipes online. We kind of just winged it because we weren't sure exactly how much applesauce or apples we had. I'll assume it was maybe about 2 pounds. We did about a cup of brown sugar, a couple tablespoons of cinnamon. We added nutmeg, cloves, a pinch of salt, and then some vanilla. We pretty much did it to taste because we didn't have an exact recipe for what we were doing. So I wrote down roughly what we did. It tastes pretty good. We're going to try canning it, and as long as it works out, we'll probably try this recipe again and might tweak it as we go to perfect it for us. We'll get these filled. We have a pot of water on the stove starting to warm up. These ones, because we don't have anything prepped, because I don't know if I mentioned, we have been cooking this down for like 26 hours or so, just because it was so runny. We wanted to get it to thicken up some. So all of our stuff is cold at this point. I'll get the jars filled and in the water, and then once the water starts to boil with these in it, I'll start my timer and we'll water bath for about 20 minutes.